Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next we answer your questions about biking, running in bad conditions, shoe drops, and more. And after that, World of Running updates about records in high school, Kenya's problems, and big money. Well, glad to have you with us once again. This is, of course, our favorite time of the week where we get to talk to you, so you have our voice in your ears. Speaking of great things to have in your body, this piece of licorice is great, and it's green. All right.
Exciting stuff. Okay, super random.
In case, well, it is good. And so that the licorice guy, free ad, is the best licorice on the planet. So if you like that kind of stuff,
you know,
that's
we should send some to Kira D'Amato because she says
Does she like licorice?
She had Twizzlers and a couple of
Well, we don't have to send it to her now. We can just tell her because Kira listens to our podcast. She told us that this is the most informative thing she's ever heard in the sport of running.
She did not. That's fallacy. But she has been very kind, and it's possible that we'll have her on again in the future.
Absolutely.
Get excited.
Well, speaking of things to be excited about, this is the Q&A episode. At the end of the month, every month, we answer your questions, and we have arrived at that time once again, our favorite time of the month. Mm-hmm. And speaking of, if you missed your opportunity to submit your question, you can still do so because we'll do it again next month. Yeah. And these questions are the kind of thing that's like anything that's related to running stuff. You know, certainly people ask about the equipment and the gear. They ask about the conditions and how it, trades off with running. They ask about training. They ask about racing. They ask about nutrition, all this stuff. And if we can answer it, we will. Mm-hmm. And if we can't answer it, we might still try anyway.
You might find an expert
and
that's
ask them on
the show. So it gives us ideas for the podcast because, of course, we're here to help you thrive. You've heard us say it, and we'll continue to say it. We love connecting with all of you. We appreciate getting the opportunity to hear about what you're doing in running, to connect with you on social media, or maybe you've emailed us and we've exchanged some ideas about running, as this episode is kind of an accumulation of. And I just want to thank you for doing that. Last week, we had an episode about gratitude, and a couple of you had reposted about it. Amanda's one of them. Really enjoying that as part of the, on her run, she actually listened to the podcast after Thanksgiving, and it was just a really good way for her to process all the things that running gives her. So I appreciate her posting about it, and again, we're thankful for all of you. We're
thankful that you're thankful for our thankfulness episode. This is what I just heard. Now, speaking of, if you missed your chance to submit, make sure you do so at AtoZrunning.com/question. That's the easiest way to share those things with us. Of course, if you're on all those other places like social medias, and I guess there's things like that out there, you can certainly comment and ask questions in those locations as well.
He says it like that because I'm the one who manages it. Some of you guys have gathered that, but some of you may be new to our show.
Well,
so I manage
the social media
is
so successful.
On social media.
The reason it's successful is because Zach's not on it. Because Zach is just a bitter, resentful troll when he uses things like that, and it's just not pleasant. So this is a much better vehicle for our talent.
Well, let's talk about the Whoville 5K, Zach.
Speaking of pleasant times, if you have not yet registered and you're in the West Michigan area on December 11th, then you must do so. Because what is a better way to enjoy some festive season spirit but to compete in one of the most festive seasonal events really ever.
In West Michigan.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's the Whoville 5K. It's on December 11th. It is available to you at a discount if you use code AtoZ5. That's ATOZ5.
Yep. Speaking of codes, we have quite a few of them, and some of you are still looking for gifts for your loved ones for the holiday season. So I will link to some of them with this episode. AtoZrunning.com/episode
165.
165. So I'll have a few of them there. One of them is ProTech Athletics. We love their orbs. There's a few different kinds of orbs, but we have, in our last episode, we talked about it too, but they're just a really good opportunity to roll and opportunity to roll.
Just roll that opportunity.
With this.
Roll with it.
Yeah, roll with it.
Okay.
It's smaller than a foam roller and all the things. So I'll link to the a bunch of different ones, but that one in particular is AtoZ20. A to Z20. I think I need a Twizzler.
You might. Speaking of things that you need to hear our answers to your questions. So let's get on to the main topic. So for this month, we've got a slew of questions about a number of very different things. So it's always fun because we can kind of address things that are not regularly covered on the episodes at large as well, which I always enjoy. That begins then with our first question from Sam from Amsterdam, Samantsterdam, if you mash it all together.
Fun. Yeah, her name is Samantha.
Yeah.
She now lives in the USA, but she's from Amsterdam, so pretty cool.
Samantsterdam. So the question reads from Sam, for my marathon in February. Oh, timely. This is good. All right. For my marathon in February, my mileage will peak around 70 miles per week. I'm also doing strength 2 times a week. And would it be in any way beneficial if I also do a low heart rate indoor bike session a couple of times a week to build aerobic system even more? So by low heart rate, she's talking about 115 to 120. So this would be beneath the range that's considered like an aerobic stimulus. Okay. Is this right? Is the question. Would that help? What do you think, Andy?
I think it's helpful to move blood. I think it's good for recovery. I don't think that it's going to help grow your aerobic fitness very much, if at all. But I do think that it can be beneficial for, like I said, moving blood, moving your body, if it's something that's not going to impact your life so much that it makes you more fatigued. So, I mean, the trade-off would be what? I guess I don't really know for sure. Like, would it be more sleep or would it be time doing other recovery things?
What would you be doing instead during that time? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I agree with that.
Okay.
When it comes down to it, when we talk about things like cross-training with runners, we have a few layers that are pretty straightforward. And so in this situation, it sounds like the question is you're not willing to run more than 70. And so if you're not willing to run more than 70, then you're going to have more time that you could do training, but you're not going to do any more running. And so this is how we tend to look at this kind of a thing. All right, if I can't run more than I'm currently running safely and healthily, so for instance, if you're already running 10 to 12 hours a week, you shouldn't be running any more than that. You don't need to be. I guess you could a little more and potentially still be beneficial, but not much. That's like for most humans, you wouldn't run more than that. Okay, so if you're already running that much, then yes, if you have more time and you want to do something else, I think, and this is an example of something that could be valuable because it is adding a layer of activity. Like Andy said, there's some recovery value to very low effort biking. It is moving the blood around a bit. And there's also, there's some other things going on in your systems. It's not really going to be an aerobic stimulus, not if you're doing high quality running training for a while already. Initially it might be, but not over time. Unless you increase the intensity a bit. So that brings in kind of the question of what are some of the other layers. If you need more training stimulus and you can run, we always want to go that direction. If you have reasons why you can't run more, then we look for cross-training options that can help supplement that up to that 10 to 12 hours a week. So, Sam, here's the point. If you're not already doing a total amount of activity that's aerobic in nature of 10 to 12 hours, then I would increase the intensity of those bike rides if you're going to do the bike rides so that they're more of an aerobic stimulus still. Because that 10 to 12 hour range tends to be kind of an optimal amount of time spent stimulating your cardiovascular and aerobic systems. So that's probably answering your question directly. Is it a waste of time? No, it's never a waste of time, but there could be things that could be more beneficial potentially. So looking at the whole and trying to identify that.
Props to you. For strength 2 times a week and getting up to 70 miles a week. So
I mean, that's good stuff.
Good stuff, Sam.
All right, next up is a question from Haley. And she writes, are there times when it makes sense to do a run, easy or hard, so that it could be either, but outside in the bad elements? She's talking about winter running
in
the
Michigan.
moment. Yep. To see variable benefits or like some other kind of benefit to being like running in the difficult conditions. Or other times when you see more benefit by running inside instead. So really the question is there benefit to both, either or
and at what times maybe?
Yeah, what defines that difference?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you think?
I think that there can be value for diversity of your runs. So let's say you're on the treadmill every single day. I think that you're missing out on some of the stimulus that you're going to get outside, especially for your stabilizer muscles and having to maybe work those a little bit more too. I think that there's value to having diversity in your training. So I guess I would not advise people to do hard efforts outside when it's slippery, pretty much ever, unless you can do it with ice bikes on dirt roads, maybe, where the effort could be there, but you're obviously not going to be able to run as fast, but you could still get the effort right. If you're pushing off and it's unstable and you're trying to go hard, there's a huge potential for injury. And so I wouldn't advise going outside for that. Now, easy stuff, just you slow it on down. You're not pushing off super hard. We're going to talk with Dr. Todd in about a week or so about cadence. And one of the suggestions, spoiler alert for next week, is that when you have adverse conditions, you want to increase your cadence. And we've mentioned that on the podcast before. You're going to want to think about light, quick steps rather than pushing off powerfully. So that would just be, that's an extra tip. Sorry, I just went there. But it's practical, right? So I think that consideration for the adverse conditions part is something to consider. How about you?
Yeah, that's a good point, that there's ways of doing it so that it's better or worse. When it comes down to it, though, yes, when you're in adverse conditions, if there's any increased risk by doing increased effort or volume, it's almost never the best choice. And so as we do these kinds of things, health and consistency are the most important anchor principles to maintaining success as a runner. And so in order to do that, you have to make the choice first about what's the thing that's likeliest to be healthy and keep me, from getting hurt. And so in that sense, yeah, I mean, you always are going to run into situations. A good example of this is if you do this experiment, run on a treadmill for a month straight, no outside running whatsoever, and then go run on a just mildly hilly route, and maybe for an hour, not anything crazy, and then see how your legs feel afterward. Chances are you're going to be sore. Why is that? It's because the treadmill is not working your musculoskeletal system in the same way that if you're running on solid ground, which means that there is a need as a runner to make sure that we're keeping some amount of contact with both if we're having to do. So like the instance there is if you do the opposite, you're only running outside and then you go try to run a 2.5 hour long run on a treadmill, you're probably not going to feel great the next day, and you might cause yourself long-term problems too. So in that instance, we like to have contact with multiple mediums in that sense of running. Now, that said, Haley, in your situation in particular, as you're asking the question here, you want to keep in mind then, I don't look for variable benefits in running in adverse conditions in terms of general training. But if I'm training for, let's say, a 25K trail race in the winter, and I'm saying that because there may or may not be a few athletes out there listening right now who are training for a 25K trail race or longer, because that Yankee Springs trail race that some of you are doing in January is just that. So if that's the case, well then, I do want to be prepared for my legs to handle what it's going to experience out there in that race, in which case I may take some risks, and I'll be very careful with them, and it's not going to be hard efforts ever, but I'll do some easy efforts deliberately. Like I'll go out on a winter trail to a mountain bike trail in the winter and run some easy hours on that to try to help condition my legs, because they're going to have to be able to do that. So it depends then on the specifics of the situation as far as whether there's adaptations desirable. But in general, in terms of training and building fitness on the whole, the risk is never worth it unless you have a particular need.
Mm-hmm. And we did just touch briefly on the treadmill and doing a lot on that. And many of you are probably at a treadmill as we are speaking to you in your ears. And we do recommend for treadmills. We've said it a few times, so I apologize if I'm a broken record on this, but make sure that you're doing, you're varying your incline, because that will help with getting a better stimulus, and also that overuse injury thing that can hang over your head if you're doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah, some free advice there for you in addition to the answer to the question. Yes, lots of content on treadmill running and how to approach that well, definitely. So next question here is from Andrea, and this one, again, related to some adverse conditions running, but now if you're doing the running outside, what do you put on your feet? So her question, do you have recommendations for winter running shoes or traction devices? And she, like the rest of us, hates slipping on ice, need to figure something out because there are days where you got to do the runs outside. And many of you don't have easy access to treadmills. And so your option is you've got to find a way to run that stuff outside. Mm-hmm. So how do you do it?
Yeah. This is a disclaimer. There is one kind of like shoe that we haven't tried. Zach and I haven't. Those shoes that have like those rubbery spikes that are on them. The studs in them. Yeah. They're like made specifically for running in the snow and ice. They're very expensive.
Yeah. The value of those is that the studs in the bottom are not metal. And so they're not going to wear down as quickly. Like if you're stepping on pavement every now and then with those metal studs in your shoes.
It might wear quickly. We don't really know, but it's not going to hurt your foot as much.
It shouldn't be as much of an issue.
Yeah. So our recommendation, what we've been actually doing the last couple of years, is we will drive to a spot that has dirt roads, and we will wear our ice spikes. Ice spikes are just pretty much a screw that go into the bottom of your trainer.
And they have teeth instead of just a regular screw head. So many of you use the strategy of just screwing literal screws into the bottom of your shoe, and you create your own studs that way. And that seems to work fairly well. Yeah. The main issue there in difference is that screws are either flat or rounded, or the top of them is not itself designed to be a gripping device. Whereas ice spikes are built for that purpose, and they're made out of a lightweight. They're like graphite or something. So they're going to break down faster, which means you can't use them quite as long as you can in just a regular steel screw or something.
Depends on how fluffy the snow is you're running in.
Exactly. So that's only if you're hitting surfaces that are a little bit harder, like a dirt road or pavement.
Yeah. I've had great success with it and felt very secure running in a lot of adverse conditions. So I do recommend that because of that success. But also just know that you do have to slow down in general when you're going to go out in the snow and ice.
Part of Andrea's question here specifically is because she'll be running on a paved path, like a bike path, quite a bit. And so the issue you're going to run into with something like that is most of the time on these paved bike paths, even if they're just incredibly snow covered and or icy for a stretch, there's always going to be some bald stretches.
Yeah.
So you're going to hit some pavement areas, and that's where the ice spike is sometimes a deterrent for people in these kinds of situations. That's why they go to something like a yak tracks or otherwise. We still find, if that's the case, even then, I still prefer the ice spike if that's minimal. If the coverage is pretty consistent and there's just something occasional like that, I still prefer the ice spike. However, my perspective is I would much rather, in either case, regardless of whether that's potentially the case, I'd go to a dirt road and run with spiked shoes on a dirt road so that I don't ever even have to worry about that.
And the path near our home, when I've had ice spikes and there have been bald patches, as Zach says, I go to the side of the path so that it's just dirt.
Run in the deep snow?
Or deep snow, depends on what's there, right? Yeah. But I'll just go to the side and avoid clink, 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 clink on the pavement.
Scratching up the pavement.
And the other recommendation that we have for kind of the in-between weather, where it's like just random patches of snow and it's mostly pavement, we recommend trail shoes because they have more grip on them.
Yeah, especially when it's like that, like the thicker, wet stuff, and so it's still slippery, but it's not like you're not talking about running on ice or deep snow. The trail shoes tend to work fairly well.
If you're going to be doing a race this winter, I don't recommend a lot of the super shoes, especially if you haven't been like practicing in them with wet snow and ice
or cold weather.
It is so slippery. Those things don't have traction. So
also, cold weather negates a fair amount of the benefits that the shoes provide in terms of how they react in terms of energy return. So what the cold weather does is it's actually going to solidify that sole of the shoe, which is already a super hard shoe sole. And most of the energy return happens when the compression in the shoe hits the carbon plate and it decompresses. They don't compress hardly at all when it's very cold. So don't wear super shoes in winter races. It could actually be like bad for the shoe too.
Yeah, well, and you also don't want to slip and fall.
Well, there's that. Yep.
Yep.
Good. All right. Well, our final question here. This is good. We've got time for all of them. This one's from Jeremy. And I can appreciate, here's another footwear question in a very different context. So Jeremy's asking about zero drop shoes. And the question includes a fair bit of context. And I want to give that to you so we have some clarity, because his situation helps us define how we're going to answer something like this. So the question generally is, do you think that the zero drop shoes put too much pressure or stress over long term on the calves? And here's more of the thought. The reason for the question is that I have had a lot of calf and foot issues in the past, often just like the nagging chronic stuff, not necessarily like a major injury. And as the training goes on, they tend to become less frequent. So they're more kind of in the early stages of a rebuilding in a training cycle. Now, most of the time just wearing standard training shoes, not trying to mess around with like some of the other flat stuff. Okay, so now that being the case, should it or would it be beneficial to transition to a shoe with a lower drop? Would that help potentially with these nagging issues that keep coming up? Or would it exacerbate them? And would recovery time be increased or decreased potentially by changing the nature of the footwear? Side note, there's also a leg length discrepancy here. I had asked him in a follow-up about that because that's oftentimes something that's related to when people are changing footwear. You know, do they have orthotics? Do they have shoe lifts? Any of that kind of stuff. So in this case, a leg length discrepancy, but it's not being directly treated mechanically, like by a shoe lift or anything of that nature. Because when in the past they tried to, it actually caused other problems, as these things often do. So the body seems to be, in this case, adapted to that discrepancy. He doesn't seem to have issues that relate directly to that. Okay, so that's where we're going. Now, there's a reference here to part of the question is coming from some of the comments in the Born to Run book and some of the circulating material on barefoot and minimalist running.
Because zero drop shoes are minimalist
Not
shoes.
always. No, not always. You can find some zero drop shoes out there that are like super thick and fluffy shoes. They just don't have a massive heel to toe drop.
Okay.
There's a couple few companies that specifically, Adidas is one of them, that often try to do less of a drop.
Dr. Bill Johncock.
It would be great to have him on to discuss in length. So what we're coming to here, Jeremy, is when you're talking about shoes, you have to start with, what am I wearing right now and how's it working for me? And that's an important question, because if you make substantial changes all at once, then you're always going to have some kind of problem. To some degree or another. It's just inevitable. And so whenever you make changes, you have to make them slowly over time.
Yep. And that was, thank you, Dr. Bill Johncock.
Absolutely.
That was his suggestion.
And when you're making those kinds of changes, you have to be making them in the direction of the kind of thing that you want, essentially, that what is the best situation long term for being a healthy and strong runner. And so this is where the question with the Born to Run stuff starts to come up, because they have found time and time again that long term runners who move toward minimalist running have more injuries of greater degree long term than runners who don't. Okay, so now that's a very hard thing to prove in specificity. It's a very clear general trend, but it's not true for every person. So that's where we get into then, in your own situation, you have to try to now start to navigate these things very precisely. So you've got some nagging issues over time. The first solution is never a structural change, and here's why. Because almost every problem that every runner has, origins are in some kind of weakness or instability. That's a Jay DeSherry quote almost directly. And so when we start to look at especially lower leg issues.
Careful when you're not saying his actual words.
I know. I didn't say his actual words. But he specifically is talking about lower leg issues in one particular resource, where he says almost all lower leg problems, especially calf and Achilles and soleus, are going to be something related to foot weakness or foot instability. And so when you can strengthen the foot, many, if not most of those things tend to go away completely. But that's going to take time. And so once again, we enter into the conversation of, we need to change one thing at a time, and we need to change things slowly. So the first solution is, have I attempted to address the potential of weakness or instability yet? And if I do want to try to do that, I need to give it 4 to 8 weeks minimum to try to see if it's improving the scenario. So you have to be patient with that, because then you first try that angle. And then, as you say, in your situation, Jeremy, you're going to have the natural occurrence of diminishing problems as you train, because this is something that has happened to you in the past. Once you're in a training cycle, the problems tend to lessen as you get stronger, which by itself is kind of indicative of the possible solution here as well. So let's work on the strength side of it. And you know that the issues tend to be worse at the beginning of a cycle. So what you want to do is be most focused on strengthening things before you begin a training cycle, so that you have a little bit of head start before you then get into it, and see how that addresses things. So that's the first solution. The second thing is, do you need or do you have desire to make a footwear change long term for other reasons? And a good example is anyone who's dealing with something that has been corrected structurally by like foot mechanics, like a orthotic in your shoe or something of that nature. Most of those kinds of things, ideally, you don't want to have a solution like that if the problem can be resolved naturally by strengthening or adjusting your running mechanics. So you're always going to pursue a solution of what do I need to strengthen, loosen, mobilize, or stabilize, and address those things without changing anything about what I'm currently doing in my footwear. And then once I've spent a substantial amount of time with that, start making a slight adjustment to my footwear situation or foot gear situation and see how I respond to that slowly over time. Be patient, because we highly encourage a long amount of time spent to these changes. And I'll give you, so case in point, I have personally worn a shoe orthotic, a custom shoe orthotic, since I was 10 years old. Okay. Now, during all of that time, only recently in working with Adam Homolka of Endurance Rehab, absolutely a great resource to anyone in West Michigan. So Adam has started to talk to me about how, this shoe orthotic situation is not generally ideal long-term unless it is necessary structurally. And he does not see evidence that it is necessary structurally. More that it was kind of like a break fix in a moment, and we just stuck with it because we assumed when I was a kid that that's what I should do for the rest of my life. So he's been encouraging me through his support and very slowly over years now to ease our way out of the shoe orthotic. And it has worked very successfully. We've never made dramatic changes during any of this time, but have had great success with seeing progress in that regard. So that's my personal story seems to affirm that, but that's of course just one anecdote. The data on the whole is pursue the strength route first, simply because most of the problems tend to be resolved by that, and make adjustments to footwear stuff later if the goal desires a footwear change ultimately.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Thanks, Zach.
Well, and with all your questions answered now, you are fully enlightened and educated. And so, no? Andy's scowling
That's
at
beyond us. They are fully enlightened and educated beyond us.
Okay, well, we appreciate that. And more questions on the way next
Yes.
month. And if you missed your chance, submit them by going
still have a chance.
to AtoZrunning.com/question.
You'll have a chance every month.
Yes. All right, well, let's get on to the world of running.
Congrats to some A to Z runners on some strong racing
Congratulations.
over the holiday. We had 8K races. We had Z-Step top 5 finish. Daniel a PR and Haley a PR.
That's a good day. We had
Yeah.
3 runners run this one 8K race, and all 3 of them with excellent results.
Excellent results.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
It
It's
also
fun to do
happened
an
to
8K
it
too.
happened to be a great day for racing too, which was just
Nice weather.
made it really fun for everyone. Yeah.
Speaking of great days for racing, on that same day, 5K races, Zach a PR, 2nd overall.
Nicely done, Zach.
Bill, 3rd overall.
Nice work.
Adi, a PR. Andrew, Brandon, 1 minute. Wait.
Andrew ran. Brandon ran
Okay.
in a 1-minute PR.
And then we had Aaron and Hannah running really strong.
And Hannah's race was her fastest in years
Since
as well.
2016. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Huge.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kyle, closest PR. Mark, a PR. And Martha had a strong run too.
Yeah, that's a good one. Now, let's apply the caveat. It is necessary to do so because most of you who we just named are putting in your posts like on Strava and such that there's some uncertainty because everyone felt like the course might have been a little bit short. No one knows exactly how much, and
Still great running.
you know
Still
what?
great
Even if it
running.
was,
Yep.
this is still incredible, and everyone's still running super fast, so I'm not worried about it. That was amazing. Nicely done. Others also ran in a less structured race, but had lots of fun. So Dano, Marissa, nicely done running the gobble wobble. Always good fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, lots of great racing. By the way, if you want to race great like that, we have some resources and services that may appeal to you at AtoZrunning.com/coaching.
Sneaky little plug.
Sneaky little plug. All right.
Kids, keep getting faster.
Who would have guessed
Wow.
it? It's one of these things, right? So the sport has to always keep improving. It's inevitable that what amounts to over time the improvements get harder to achieve. We're in kind of one of those eras right now where it seems like the improvements are really easy to achieve. Like almost
not easy.
I know, but it seems like that because they're just getting so much faster so quickly, which is exciting. Maybe some of it's super shoes, maybe some of it's not, because we're talking about high schoolers now, and that's not nearly
maybe
as much
it's
of a
education
factor,
too on the sport.
Exactly.
Coaches are getting better.
Discipline, quality training, who knows? Yeah. But anyways, it's lots of excitement. So this one reported by Mile Split. Now we're talking about a Foot Locker Nationals scenario, which I always appreciate because all the attention tends to be on like those few big national cross country races for high schoolers. But there's other things going on too. And Irene Briggs just ran 20 seconds faster than Caitlin Tuohy's course record.
What?
The
national
course.
NCAA champion for
the
cross country?
Caitlin Tuohy, who 2 years ago ran this course record on this course, and now 2 years later is the NCAA national champion, right?
What?
This girl just ran 20 seconds faster.
Wow.
Okay, now,
20
first of all,
seconds.
these are always apples and oranges when you compare
Right.
cross country.
Cross-country.
Whether the nature of the ground can be so different if it rained a lot
true.
or
If it's a
so
little frozen.
who knows? The point is, it's that good. Because not only did she run 20 seconds faster than Caitlin Tuohy's course record, which is just impressive even if the conditions are better, she also ran the second fastest cross-country time by a high school girl in the U.S. ever.
In history.
In history. 4 seconds off of the fastest
Whoa,
time ever.
16:02?
Yes. Did I mention? She ran 16:02 in a cross-country 5K as a high schooler. Yes, she did. The best time by Jenna Hutchins is 15:58, so she's just a hair slower than that. It's a second faster than Natalie Cook's best ever, and Natalie Cook was just 7th in the NCAA championships as a true freshman. Okay, so this is the kind of caliber we're talking about here. Incredible. What's interesting to me, and this I always find this fascinating, I want to know more about what's going on here because she also apparently just ran like a 30-second PR to do it.
Breakthrough.
That is something. All
yeah,
right.
it's interesting. Actually, we should try to find out more information about that.
Okay.
Because when I've gotten PRs, they're usually by significant amounts as well.
I have not, but that's and it happens. So as breakthroughs occur, this is the kind of thing you would expect, and so maybe that may be something. Speaking of Caitlin Tuohy,
because she's always, I guess, in our conversations come cross country.
well, why wouldn't she be given what she's doing? Caitlin Tuohy makes headlines again because she just signed a professional contract with Adidas. Where that used to mean, when we would say that used to mean she's exiting the collegiate scene, right? Because
it doesn't mean that
in the
anymore.
past, you had to exit the collegiate scene if you were going to be professional. Not anymore, since the NCAA in 2021 passed the name, image, likeness rule that now allows collegiate athletes to make money based off their name, image, likeness. They cannot, so the stipulations are clear, they cannot be like pay to play bonuses or like, so she can't get paid a bonus for winning NCAA championships from Adidas. They're not allowed to do that. But they can pay her for her endorsements and such. So
interesting.
Yeah.
For the spring, for instance, like when she runs track, of course, like, can she then do a summer diamond league? And
that's my question. I'm very interested.
She breaks records.
Okay. So if she does things that are profound at NCAA meets, she can't get paid for that. But I believe she can get paid bonuses for non-collegiate competition. So if she's in a meet like the USA Championships, because collegians run in those meets all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't actually know the answer to that. I'm speculating. I think she can be paid bonuses for non-NCAA events.
Fascinating thing.
Yes, very fascinating.
And I'm excited. I'm excited because I think it's good for runners to get paid.
Well, yeah. So I have mixed feelings. I'll be the first to tell you I do not agree with the NCAA's general perspective here. I think it is contrary to the aim of student athlete and the collegiate competition scene to then be paying athletes. First and foremost, because they're already getting paid. They're getting a free education, and every expense associated with their competition while they're in college is paid for. So they're getting compensated heavily. No. Anyone who competes collegiately is getting compensated because they're, all the costs of traveling to a meet.
Walk on?
All the costs of,
okay.
Unless they have to pay their own way to get to the race, which is, yes, that is true in some scenes. But anyway.
I want them to get paid for their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, I do not.
I think it was like, no, okay.
No.
Well, we agree to disagree.
And simply because they're amateur athletes by the nature of being a student athlete. And so they will get paid for the name, image, likeness when they're professional. If
Well,
they get to that scene.
somebody's like getting gypped in a scenario where they're not getting paid for it directly because, yeah, somebody is getting more publicity.
The institution. That's who is benefiting from that athlete during that time. And I fully support that model because, one, it's temporary, and two, it has limitations on it as well. Like they can't
That's like saying
compete
like,
forever
okay,
for a
so I
college.
work in marketing, and so like if somebody's modeling, they get paid for their likeness, their image.
Yeah.
So when they use real athletes instead of models, I think they should be. I think it's cool when they use real athletes.
Collegiate athletes for name,
they
image,
might.
likeness things in the past is what I'm saying.
I know, but what I'm saying is this is another job.
Yes.
Like, this is like she's.
And I'm
she's
saying
gonna
it
go,
shouldn't be.
See, but I disagree with you on that because they're going to use somebody.
Yeah.
So
the
might as well
professionals.
be. No, not all the time.
No, but that's what I'm saying. They should use the pros.
No, they
so
don't all the time.
yeah, and what it comes down to, and so Andy and I know well that we disagree on this, and that's entirely okay because NCAA changed the rule, and so that's the reality of the current situation. But here's why I don't like it, because what it has become, which it always was going to, keep in mind this was inevitable. It is in fact a popularity contest.
Oh, yeah.
And here's how you know.
Disappointing.
Because the reason these companies are shilling money to certain athletes it is also because they're successful, but it is predominantly based on how big a following they have. Caitlin Tui has 91,000 followers on Instagram. Okay? That is why Adidas wants to be giving her money. Not because she's the NCAA champ. Of course, they want that too. But that'll come. The performances will come later, like as a professional, when they really get attention. They want those 91,000 followers on Instagram. The other two examples that are notable at the moment is Charles Hicks of Stanford won the men's race. They were talking about he may have more opportunity for some NIL sponsorships. Why? Because he has 30,000 subscribers on YouTube. Not because he won the NCAA championships. Of course, they go hand in hand. I realize that. But now it's a popularity contest, and I'm not a fan because what it amounts to is the athletes are now concerned with how much attention they can get.
Yeah,
not
that is
with what they're supposed to be
another
doing.
layer of stress.
It is, in fact, that.
It's a layer of stress.
I argue it will breed negative outcomes long term for the sport and for collegiate
I hope
scene.
not.
I hope not too. But I'm a
always hope for
pessimist,
the
so I'm always
best.
looking for the pessimistic
So
thing.
now you get to rein in your pessimism.
Speaking of my pessimism, this next one here is unfortunate.
It is.
And yes, so we've been talking a little bit because it's been all over running news that this year there's been another swath of major doping busts or something related to or similar to doping rules violations. And so many of those stories this year have been related to Kenyan runners, specifically marathoners who've been winning big races in the past. And that's why it's been making headlines, because it's like, this marathon majors winner just got busted, or this one who is top three times just got busted. And so that's what everyone keeps saying. Well, the unfortunate reality is it's true. It has been true that there's been a lot specifically of Kenyan athletes in some kind of rules violation. And what it is now amounting to, which was always inevitable if things weren't going to improve, is World Athletics is now looking at a possible national ban for the nation of Kenya
So unfortunate.
and all of their runners in the next 4-year span, which means they would be out for the next Olympic Games. This is a possible thing. It's not been decided. There are specific situations where Russia's a good example. This has been going on. Now Russia's in its like second ban or something at the moment. And it's because the nation won't cooperate with the stipulations. Yes, the stipulations put on them for how they should hold their athletes accountable. And there's a lot of reasons why. In some instances, it's very difficult. So we have to keep in mind here that the way that the World Anti-Doping Agency and the Athletics Integrity Unit, the way they impose these stipulations on countries some are more able to accomplish them than others. They can be very difficult things in their specificity. And a good example of that is they're supposed to test athletes. Kenya in the last year was required to test athletes more than most countries in terms of random testing. However, Kenya has a singular problem. They have a lot of very fast runners, and you don't know which ones are going to be top tier runners
Right.
because any one of them can be.
And they only did like a certain amount of top runners. And then, like, for instance, who just won the New York Marathon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the woman who won the New York Marathon, she wasn't on that list. She hadn't been tested.
Because she wasn't
like a really
considered one of those top tier runners until she. So this is a problem, and it's very difficult for Kenya. But there's another layer of this that's very difficult, which is that their own internal body that's supposed to be involved in these kinds of things is super corrupt. It has been for a long time. It's been known internationally, and they have not been successful in rooting out that corruption effectively. And so as a consequence, they're looking at a possible national ban. And that would be super unfortunate.
That's very unfortunate.
Kenya's headlining every distance event.
Right. And a lot of the names that though you've heard that have come up a lot do get tested quite a bit if they're racing a lot. So, like Eliud Kipchoge, like he gets tested all the time.
That had to come up, right? So Eliud Kipchoge is one of the big reasons why this is a
he's
concern.
getting tested. Yep. So it's unfair for the clean athletes that this is not being regulated as well as it should be. So it's just unfortunate all around. It's just sad. It
is that. So this is the question that everyone's wondering. That's what becomes of people like Kipchoge if Kenya gets a national ban? Well, there are options, and you see this with many of the Russian athletes currently, where they can compete, but they cannot compete to represent their country. They have to compete as a kind of third party, essentially, body. And so there are methods and means for an athlete to prove their own integrity and then still compete. Kipchoge could still win all the things that all his goals and such can still be accomplished with or without Kenya, but it would be super sad. That's not ideal. Yeah. So what's the solution here? Well, they have to fix internally what's going on there, and they can potentially still ride this out. We'll find out. This may have actually, by the time you hear this may have already actually been decided one way or the other, because it's supposed to be happening very soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have numbers here.
Oh yeah, let me share this, because this is just to give you kind of an idea of why this is a major concern. So in the year 2022, 17 Kenyan athletes were sanctioned or banned in just 1 year's time, and there's 8 more that are provisionally possibly suspended or may have a suspension that's awaiting adjudication or whatever they call that. And then to give you a broader perspective, I went on the Athletics Integrity Unit database and tried to find where are the raw numbers for everything. So in the year 2022, there have been 29 new suspensions issued and confirmed. And so that means that they caught an athlete, they proved it, they've issued the suspension 29 times in 2022. 7 of them, or 25% of them, were Kenyan athletes. 25% of all of the busts in the entire world were Kenyan athletes. So that gives you a picture of it's a pretty steep problem right now. And by the way, Russia under a national ban right now, several of the others were Russian, because even though they're on a national ban, they are still dealing with the problem too. So, yep, you can see there why it's a heightened concern. All right, well, we didn't want to end on some bad news, so we got something awesome here. We're gonna put a link, and you have to just go follow the link and check this out. This is World Athletics Best Photos of 2022.
Ah, cool!
I love it. This is so cool. So what we're gonna do right now is we're going to just quickly comment on a couple of our favorites, so you get an idea of what they're putting in these photos, and that will then entice you to go click on this link to look at them yourself. We don't gain any benefits by you clicking on this link. We don't get compensated in any way. It's just fun and awesome. So what they've done is they've just taken a collection. There's quite a few of them of these shots, and it's awesome stuff. Like, they've got a lot of really interesting pole vaulters ones. The pole vaulter with the rainbow behind him.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's like, oh yeah, look at that. So there's like 4 of that same one throughout there. But I'm just going through as Andy and I are looking at this. I'll tell you what my favorite one is and see if you can guess it when we get through here. There's the high jumper who's like flying. Yep.
Jav.
Some good javelin ones. Yeah, there's a couple. I love that. So there's an audience shot. Mondo Duplantis broke the world record in the pole vault at the World Championships, if you recall. They have one shot where he's out of focus and the audience is in focus behind him. And there's these 4 guys. All right. So you have 4 different reactions. Okay. I'm going to tell you what each of them are. One guy has his hands clasped almost like he's in prayer. Like, do it, please do it, please do it. And he's like this look of just concentration on his face. Just awesome. All right. The guy right next to him has both hands down on the rail, which is actually glass, mouth wide open, and he's either yelling or he's just in awe of what just happened. One of the two is happening. Yep. The guy next to him is about to pump his fists in the air because he knows that this is the moment Mondo cleared the bar, right? So his fists are on their way up and his face is following, like just, it's so cool. And then this last guy is literally bent over the rail, hands on the railing, bent over like he's going to will Mondo to to get over this bar by sheer concentration. He's like getting as close as he can, leaning over the railing. I just love it. So good, right?
Well, there's a lot for you all to look at, so we're not going to keep going on this episode today.
But Andy, just look at these and see which one's your favorite. Mondo with the sun behind him, right? Oh, that one's so good. Look at the fireball.
The fireball.
Yep. So they've got Dream Richards throwing out what looks like kind of like a two-finger point, and right past his fingers there's a giant fireball, and it looks like he's shooting fire out of his hand. It's awesome. Yep.
Oh, there's one of just legs in the steeple.
The face plant in the steeple. You all remember that. We reported on that in the World Championships when in the women's steeplechase final. It was the final, right? It might have been the prelim, but in the women's steeplechase,
it was the prelim.
She fell over the water barrier and didn't just fall, but like took a head first dive, and you just see her legs sticking up out of the water. It's very unfortunate, but it just makes for a really cool photo.
Yep.
Okay, so lots of cool stuff. We're gonna put the link there in the post. You got to check it out so that you can see the most awesome track and field photos of 2022. And with that, speaking of awesome things, many of you are finding great value, and so we'll just simply mention it here in the opportunity to create a schedule that is customized for yourself in just a few minutes that you can use right away.
Yeah.
And so we're finding that service in particular that we provide is one of appeal right now. So if you're interested in some additional support, you don't want to pursue something like full-on coaching dynamic at this time, but you would like some training that is built for you still, that appeals directly to your immediate goals and situation, we can do that. And it only takes a few minutes for you to submit the form, and then we'll build it and turn it around in 2 days' time. How about that?
Customized for you.
Go to AtoZrunning.com/coaching and look for the training plan builder.
Well, thank you all again for joining us and for your great questions, guys. We couldn't do it without you, so we appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you next week.